Hey, shalom, 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 everyone, to the Way Wednesdays virtual Midrash. I am excited to be with you. Tonight we are in Deuteronomy, latter part of chapter 3 up through 7:11. Tonight it's Et Hanan, and I pleaded with the Lord. All right, so we're going to start there, and then we're going to go through some really important and interesting and very significant passages in Deuteronomy 4, 5, and 6 and a bit of 7, right? So this is good stuff. Buckle your seatbelts and let's get started. I'm really excited about it because it's so awesome. So let's jump in with both feet, I think, and we'll get started. So he says, "Va'et Hanan el Adonai," I pleaded with the Lord at that time, saying, "O Lord, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. For what God is there in heaven and earth who can do anything like your works and your mighty deeds?" All right. So we read this last week, right? And Moses is, lamenting that he doesn't get to go into the promised land. All right. Sad. Okay. But it's interesting. Had he gotten to go in, I just kind of suspect, I don't know, just a thought that he might not have given Deuteronomy, right? Because he's trying to prep everybody before they go in without him. So he's trying to give this second law. That's what the book of Deuteronomy, that's what it is in Greek, right? In Hebrew, it's dvarim, which is words or things. And he may not have given any of this had he been able to go into the promised land as he was originally expecting. So who knows, right? God works all things out together for good. And this is such a great book. All right, he says, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and judgments which I teach you to observe, that you may live and go in and possess the land which the Lord your God of your fathers is giving you. You shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God has destroyed from among you all the men who followed Baal of Peor. But you've held fast to the Lord your God, who are alive today, every one of you. Surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess." All right, so let's stop right there. This is a huge deal. As many of you know already, if you're listening to my show, right, we've talked about this many times, that many people in the church have a very confused view about the Torah. Now, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. I used to be one of those people. I praise God that I've kind of seen the light, and I don't mean to say that in judgment. I really don't. But this is a huge topic that has terribly, sadly, has divided the church, has given people a sour taste on the word law, on the commandments. There's a sense in many churches that Jesus died to free us from those things. This is coming straight out of Marcionism. Marcion, a second century heretic, he taught that Jesus died to free mankind from those oppressive Jewish laws, namely the Ten Commandments, or the Old Testament, if you will. That's a really bad opinion. That's a very bad teaching, in fact. And that has been around for a very long time. And so this kind of thinking has soured people to the whole idea of law. I want to give you a different perspective when it comes to what the law is all about. All right. So let's just consider really quick the laws of physics. Okay. So the laws of physics teach us a lot. And I want you to understand that a law of physics is a law whether you like it or not. It's a law whether you agree with it or not. These are just laws. And they're not something that we invented. They're something that we discovered. Okay. We discovered these laws. And when I tell you a couple of them, you're like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, obviously. But they were not always obvious, right? We had to do some trial and error, a lot of experiments, and then now we understand it. Of course, probably one of the most famous laws ever, Sir Isaac Newton. An apple fell on his head, supposedly. And this is how he discovered, he didn't come up with, but he discovered the law of gravity, right? The basic law of gravity is that objects attract other objects. That's the basic sense of the law of gravity. And it works, right? Everywhere we look, we see there's an attraction between different bodies, okay, especially really big bodies like planets and moons and that kind of stuff, right? And so this law of gravity is something that we have noticed, and it always behaves the same. And so therefore it's a law. You can agree with the law of gravity or not, but it really doesn't matter. If you jump off a cliff without some kind of parachute or wings, guess what? The law of gravity says that you're going to be pulled right down to the earth, right? Now, the law of gravity can be a good thing, right? If we didn't have that, and we'd all float out into space, and that would be a curse, right? But the law of gravity can very much be a blessing. But there's also something called the law of aerodynamics, which allows us to fly. Are we violating the law of gravity when we fly? No, we're simply using another law. And if we obey the principles of that law, then we can fly. Now, the moment we violate the laws of aerodynamics, guess what? The law of gravity becomes a curse to us, and it's going to pull us down to our death, right? You get the idea, all right? So we also have laws of motion. These are set forth in Newton's Principia, where he talks about the first rule, that an object will remain at rest or in a state of motion unless the state is acted or changed by an external force. Second rule, force is equal to the change momentum, mass times velocity, right, etc. And then we have the laws of the conservation of mass and energy. Albert Einstein discovered this in E equals mc squared, right? So the energy equals mass times the square of the constant of the speed of light, right? So that's kind of interesting, right? This is really interesting stuff. We have the laws of thermodynamics, right? So there's a zeroth law, but typically we think about the three laws of thermodynamics. So we think about those. The second one is incredibly important, right? That things tend to go from a higher state of order to a lower state of order. There's decay, right? That's the basics of that. Obviously, they deal with heat and such. You have the laws of electricity, and then you have other things in quantum mechanics. And of course, there's many, many more. I'm just giving you a couple highlights. But these laws are things that somebody created. Who created those? Oh, I know. God created those laws, right? He created them. And for thousands of years, we did not understand these things. So we understood jumping off a cliff, right? What would happen? But we didn't understand it as the law of gravity. But now we understand these, and we understand that if we live in harmony with these laws, hey, life goes really well for us. If we live in disharmony with these laws, well, things go pretty badly, right? I mean, they're pretty simple. A big object will tend to stay in motion. So if you step out in front of a big bus, guess what? You're probably going to probably die, right? Because that object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an equal force. Well, you're not an equal force to a moving bus. It's going to win, all right? And it's going to flatten you, right? So those are some of the laws that we deal with. There's lots and lots of laws that govern our physical reality. When we think about God's laws, they're all God's laws. All the ones that I just talked about, gravity, thermodynamics, those are all God's laws. Okay, now God did not spell those out for us in the Bible because, well, he really is dealing more with some of the, how to live a successful life kind of stuff, right? Like don't murder people, right? You want a good life? Don't murder people. You want a good life? Don't steal. Hey, you want a good life? Don't bear false witness against your neighbor, and you'll have a much better life if you observe these things. So those are the things that he was giving us. Now we call that the Torah, and I think that's a wonderful word because these are his instructions. These are his instructions about how to live within the parameters of the laws that exist. Okay, so think about it. If I'm going to become a pilot, what do I need? I need instruction, right? Now, the law of aerodynamics exists, and whether I accept it or not is up to me. But if I'm instructed in how to operate within the laws of aerodynamics, I can have a very successful and wonderful time. If I try to take a plane without instructions, then guess what happens to me? I'll probably nosedive and crash and die, right? That'll probably be a very short trip because I am not instructed in the ways of righteousness. Think of it Righteousness is how to fly a plane properly, right? And we even talk about it. If a plane is in a nosedive, what do you want to do? You want to right the plane. Okay, you want to right the plane. That's what we want to try to do. If it's about to crash into the earth, is you want to right the plane. We have all the same terminology. We just sometimes have to translate it from one idea or from one way of thinking to another. That's what we need to do. So when it comes to the laws that God has revealed to us, his instructions on how to live within the parameters of the laws that govern the universe, whether they are physical laws, biological laws, or they are spiritual and or moral laws, we simply need to know the instructions on how to live with these with the laws that exist. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get at, is that God's laws, whatever flavor they are immutable. They do not change. And whether you agree or not, that's up to you. But the laws do not change. And so what God has done is he has revealed to us how to live successfully with those. He's given us his instructions on what to do regarding those things. And of course, when he spoke the 10 commandments, the 10 words, he also gave sometimes consequences, like that there will be human government in relationship to someone who violates, who transgresses, who tries to transgress one of these laws, right? Then there are some consequences for said actions. Okay. So, and of course, those make sense, right? In the case of murder, should we just let people just keep murdering? And like, well, no, because that's not going to be good for the people that are murdered, right? And ultimately, it's not good for the murderer either. So that type of behavior has a consequence to it, right? There may not be so much a natural consequence, like if you jump off a cliff or you don't fly the plane properly, there's a natural consequence there. In the case of murder, right, there will be things that happen within that person's psyche and within their soul and all that stuff. But there also needs to be some kind of outward external consequence to stop that type of action from happening again, right? And that's why we see in the law what the penalties are for people that violate or transgress some of these laws. And I'm saying some because not everything has a particular penalty. For example, bearing false witness against your neighbor. There's no consequence on the books for doing that. Now, it leads to all kinds of problems, so don't do it. But there's no exact penalty like there is for murder if you should do that. So I want to just preface this whole thing as we get into God's commandments, into his Torah, that we understand that the Torah, the instructions or law, if you want to call it that, it's not something new that God gave at Mount Sinai, but this is something that was yet one more time revealed at Mount Sinai. All right, let's just go back and go through a little bit of history here to get a more complete understanding of when when we get some of the commandments. Okay, so in 26 verse 5, in Genesis 26:5, it says, Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws, which is the word tolotai. Okay, so my instructions, right? Again, it's probably too bad that it's the word laws, but hey, that's how it is. So he kept my instructions, right? But he kept all these other things too, right? He kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my instructions. Abraham was already doing that some 600 years, probably 600 years before he spoke those same things at Mount Sinai, right? That's very, very revealing. We also have in Exodus chapter 16 that the people are testing God. God's getting a little bit upset about that. And what does God say? He asked the question, this burning question. Let me just find it really quick. But he says, how long? Hold on. It's right. All right. Well, it's right here. I just can't find it. But basically, how long will you not keep God's commandments? Okay. Um, I think this is it. Anyway, um, oh, I can't find it. That just drives me crazy. Well, that's life. But we'll go to chapter 18 because here Moses' father-in-law Jethro comes and says, "Hey, Moses, what you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm telling people, they come to inquire me of God, and I let them know. I make known the statutes and his Torah, his Torotav, okay, his instructions, right? God's instructions. Notice that God's instructions here in Exodus chapter 18, right? That's 2 chapters before, right? So we're probably talking some weeks or months before God is going to speak his commandments to everybody, right? But before that, Moses seems to already know them, and he is explaining or he's instructing the people, he's teaching the people what they need to know about God's statutes and about his instructions, right? So there's many other passages as well, but we get the point here is that God's instructions are instructions about how to live in this world because there are laws that govern our world. Now, the other thing I want to say about law is it's really just the flip side of love. Love and law go hand in hand. Okay. If one is the right hand, the other's the left hand, or one is the right hand, the other one's the left hand, right? Now, that's what we're trying to say here is that law and love are the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. And let's really think about it. How many laws are there? Well, really, there's one law. There's one law, which is love. Okay. And then that one law, we can bifurcate that into two, which is love God and love your neighbor. All right. So we went from the law of love into these two different laws. Okay. What does it look like to love my neighbor? Well, if I love my neighbor, name something that I won't do to my neighbor if I love him. Anybody raise your hand? I won't murder him. There you go. Because I love him, right? There you go. Now, so you get the idea. We go from one law, the law of love, to two laws until we get to 10 laws. And then, let's break it down a little bit further. So do not murder. Well, what if I kidnap? How does that fall into that whole thing? Well, that's not loving your neighbor either, Doug, because kidnapping is equivalent to murder. Think about it, right? If somebody kidnaps my child and I never see them again, well, that's just like as if they're dead. And to the child, though they're not physically dead, they've lost a relationship. They've been stolen from their parents, and it's equivalent to murder. And so the penalty for that is death, right? So you're not allowed to kidnap, which I think is a great thing. So it's all about loving your neighbor or loving God, as it were. So all of the laws are about loving people. Let's even take some of our traffic laws here in the United States. Now, I know sometimes we don't always like the traffic laws, but let's at least look at the principles behind them. When we have a traffic signal, right? Some people are, have the green light and the people have the red light. If the people that have the red light go when they have that red light, what's going to happen? There's a high likelihood that they're going to run into somebody who's coming, right? The green light people who are going, and we're going to have a collision, right? That will be bad, to say it quite simply. That'll be very bad. And somebody could likely die because of that. So that's not exactly loving my neighbor. That's why we should stop at red lights, because we don't want to kill anybody. That's a way of loving our neighbor. And guess what? If I observe that, then there's a blessing in that. And guess what? If I don't observe it, if I violate it, I transgress that, there's a high likelihood that I will crash into somebody. I might get lucky once or twice, okay? And that's all I'll say it is just maybe some luck. But you cannot continually violate the laws, the laws of traffic flow, right? That's what's happening. You're violating the laws of traffic flow and think that it's going to end in a good way. It just won't. It will be very destructive at the end. And somebody could lose an arm or a leg, or they could die. They could lose their children. They could lose their parents, their husband, their wife, right? All kinds of terrible situations do happen each and every day, right? In traffic catastrophes. And we mourn for those, right? And sometimes they're unavoidable. Sometimes they very much are avoidable. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to God's instructions about how his universe operates. That's really what we're talking about here is how does it work? Well, here's the deal. This is how it works. If you violate these things, you're going to have curses. If you obey these things, you're going to have blessings. So kind of get that into your psyche that we're not talking about God's laws, right? And God now is telling us to keep his laws, but before he did it, and then Jesus came and he got rid of all that law. That's all nonsense. Laws are immutable. If it's a law, it doesn't change, right? If it can change, then it was never a law, right? Maybe it was a theory or a hypothesis at best, but it wasn't a law because laws are immutable. So God's laws, God's instructions about his laws are very much immutable. And so then Moses reminds them, hey guys, therefore be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Well, of course they are, because if you understand how the laws work, and then you live in the parameters of those laws, you're going to be considered wise, just like the first guys. I don't know, the Wright brothers, apparently they were the first to understand the laws of aerodynamics successfully, and they flew a plane as a result of that, and they were considered pretty wise because they did that, right? Einstein, when he discovered E equals mc squared, he was thought to be pretty wise, right? And he's still considered probably the smartest guy that ever lived, because he discovered the laws that govern our universe. You see the difference there? As understanding how God's universe works versus God imposing this whole idea of now you got to do this. See, I think a lot of times we think of God's laws as, the House and the Senate getting together and like, we're going to come up with some more laws because we don't have enough. That's not how it works. It's not God is just bored and he has nothing else to do. And he's like, I'm going to make up some more laws to make their life difficult. That's not how it is. When it comes to human laws, sometimes we have good laws and sometimes we have not so good laws. And sometimes those laws can be repealed. God's laws are never, ever, 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 never repealed, right? Because they are laws. A law is a law. It does not change. That's what I'm really trying to get through to you guys. And I hope I'm succeeding here. So if you live within the boundaries of those things, you'll be considered wise and understanding. And people are going to say, for what great nation is there that has God so near to it, as the Lord our God is to us, for whatever reason we may call upon him? Well, that's really cool, right? So the whole world understands that there's a creator, but Israel gets to live in close proximity to him, and he's just a local phone call away, right? They can dial him up anytime. Hey, God, we got a question. Yeah, go ahead, right? That's a very enviable position. That's a very special position. And God made it clear, look, you guys aren't any better than the other nations, but I made some promises to your forefathers and I love you guys. And that's that, right? And so, Moses is trying to say, you guys got the goods, man. You are in, like Flynn with God, you're in a great spot. Don't blow it. Only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life, and teach them to your children and your grandchildren, especially concerning the day you stood before the Lord your God in Horeb, when the Lord said to me, gather the people to me, and I will let them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and that they may teach their children. All right. So don't forget the instructions that God has given you. Right. I remember this. It was a stupid show, but it was the Greatest American Hero. I watched this when I was a kid. It was this kind of corny show on TV years ago, and I forget his name, but the star of the show, he was visited by aliens, and the aliens gave him this suit, and the suit allowed him to act kind of like Superman, right? He could do all these things. There's only one problem. They did not give him an instruction booklet when they gave him the suit, right? So he had a suit that had all these superpowers, but he didn't know how to use it. So that was, of course, the funny thing, is that he was flying on a wing and a prayer, and he was able to get up into the air to fly, but he wasn't very successful at it. He wasn't nearly as cool as Superman because, well, he didn't know how to use this thing, right? So all of that without the instructions turned out to be, well, kind of a funny show, at least for, I think, maybe a season or so. All right. And that's kind of what we're doing here. If you have, all of the potential, but you don't know how to use it, well, you're going to be like this guy flying on a wing in a prayer. But God has given us his instructions on how to live. And again, if we follow them, things will go well. If we don't, they won't. And we call those blessings and curses. That's really that simple. All right. Then you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire in the midst of heaven, with darkness, cloud and thick darkness. And the Lord spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but you saw no form. You only heard a voice. All right. So he's going to say this again, and he's going to warn them in just a second of idolatry. Right now, sadly, this has been used to suggest that God has no form. But we know that's not the case. Moses very clearly got to see God's form. All right. So in Numbers chapter 12, right, it says, hear now my words. If there's a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He's faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord. Okay, so Moses saw the form of the Lord, which tells you that God has a what? God has a form. Okay. This is the word tmuna. Tmuna is like a picture in modern Hebrew. It's like when you take a picture, that's a tmuna, right? So Moses got to see the picture, the form, the image of the Lord. That's really significant. Ezekiel got to see that same image in Ezekiel 1:26, and he describes what God looked like. It says, above the firmament of their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. On the likeness of the throne was the likeness or the appearance of a man high above it, right? And who is it that he's seeing here? He says, this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So this likeness that looked like Adam, which is the word in Hebrew, came out Adam. That's what God looks like. God looks like man because man looks like God. That's kind of cool, right? So God does have a form. Daniel saw that as well in Daniel chapter 7, right? He saw the Ancient of Days, and he had hair and all this stuff, and he was flames and all this that we see here in Ezekiel as well. So God most definitely has a form, but the children of Israel did not see the form. They did not see the form there when God was on the mountain. Moses got to see it. In fact, Moses says, show me your glory. And God says, okay, you can't see my face, but I'm going to put you here in this cleft of the rock. I'll put my hand over you. I'm going to pass by. My glory is going to pass by, or my goodness, he says, my goodness will pass by you, and then I'll take my hand away, and you'll see my gav, my back. All right, you'll see that. And he got to see that, right? That God is all described as also having feet. The elders of Israel got to see the feet of God, and they did not die, right? So they did get to see different aspects of God. We cannot see his face and live. That just won't be happening. But so you didn't see a form, but Moses and the elders of Israel did get to see it. So he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, the 10 commandments, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone. All right, we'll get to those in just a second. And the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments that you might observe them in the land which you cross over possess. Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you act corruptly and make yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female. So God does have a form, but we're not to make images because we don't know. We may have the basic outline that he's humanoid in features because he made us to look like him, but we're not to come up with some kind of an image of God. That is absolutely forbidden. All right, so don't make it the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water beneath the earth. And take heed lest you lift your eyes to heaven. And when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people and inheritance, as you are this day. All right, let me stop there really quick. There's so much good stuff in here. I wish I had even more time to go through it. But I want to take us over to Ephesians Chapter 1. And I need to read this, first of all, in the New King James, and then I'm going to read it in a different translation to give you a different perspective. All right, because this verse has unfortunately been poorly translated. It says, in him also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. All right, so let's imagine that this cup is the object that I'm going to inherit. Okay, so this is my inheritance. All right, so this cup is the thing being inherited. All right, and so what he's saying is, in the New King James translation, we have obtained an inheritance. So somebody gave me this. Now I have obtained this glass as an inheritance. But that's not what the Greek says. That's not at all what the Greek says. In fact, it's really, really cool what the Greek says. Okay, so it says that eklerothamen, we have been obtained as an inheritance. So imagine the glass is actually us. So just for a second, imagine I'm God. I'm receiving the people as my inheritance. So that's the difference. Paul is using the passive voice to say that we have been received as an inheritance. And I just want to show you that the New English translation actually says that, and it's to them I owe this discovery. He says, we too have been claimed as God's own possession, since we were predestined according to the purpose of him who accomplishes all things according to the counsel of his will. All right, so let's go back to our original passage, because this is where this whole idea is coming from. In Deuteronomy, verse 20. Okay, so it says that the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people as an inheritance, as you are this day. So the people are God's inheritance, right? They are the object that is being inherited by who? By God. And that's what Paul is saying. But you just see that if you translate that in the active voice or the passive voice, it can make a big difference. And then you get the impression that Paul's saying we've now inherited something. No. Paul's saying that we are the thing that God is inheriting, right? It's such a difference when you look at it that way. It's so cool because it all fits together. All right. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sakes and swore that I would not cross over the Jordan and that I would not enter the good land, which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not cross over the Jordan, but you shall cross over and possess the good land. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make for yourselves a carved image in the form of anything which the Lord your God has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. All right, I got to stop yet once again. All right. So the whole idea of the consuming fire, we just saw that in Ezekiel. I didn't read the verse. It's verse 27. It says, and I saw as his waist as it were, from his waist up, and I saw fire, and from his waist down, fire, and it was mingled with chashmal, which is the word electricity. So God is a consuming fire. That's exactly what Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7, is that God was a consuming fire. Right? So that is what God looks like. So that's probably one reason that it's not a great idea to start making carved images of what God looks like exactly, right? So we have an approximation. We don't know entirely, but he has a human form because he made us in his image, right? So Adam looked like God. Didn't God say something like that? Oh, yeah. God made us in his image and in his likeness. Oh, that's right. So we're in God's image and we're in his likeness. That means that we share a lot of features like God, right? Obviously, we're not God, but we share a lot of the features like God, and because he made us that way. All right, and he's a consuming fire. That gives us some insight as to why we can't hang out with God right now, because we don't have bodies that are compatible with his fire. Okay, he's working on that. He's going to change that when we get our new bodies. Then we can hang out in God's fiery presence, and we'll be good. All right. When you beget children and grandchildren and have grown old in the land and have act corruptly and make a carved image in the form of anything and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that you will soon utterly perish from the land which you cross over the Jordan possess. You will not prolong your days in it, but you will be utterly destroyed. Well, again, a lot of this is just simple cause and effect. What did Paul say? Don't be deceived. God is not mocked. What a man sows, that he'll also reap. If a man sows to unrighteousness, he will also reap unrighteousness. If you sow to righteousness, you'll reap righteousness, right? So even Paul in the New Testament said this, right? In the New Covenant, he said this because it's a truism. It's a law. It does not change. And you can try to violate it, but you're not going to break it. You're not going to somehow overcome the laws that God has established. You will simply fall on them, or they will fall on you, I should say. Electricity, is it a blessing or a curse? Well, I love electricity. I do all kinds of things with electricity. But if I go and hold on to 240 volts with two hands, it's going to quickly turn into a curse. And that'll be the last you hear from me, because I would have violated the law of electricity and it could become a curse to me. Right? So don't recommend that. And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you'll be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And there you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. All right, let me go back just a second, right? Because it says that he's a jealous God. I wanted to talk about that. This is where some people are like, oh, God's such a jerk. He's just a jealous God. But it's El Kana or El Kane, depending on if it's a pausal form. But this word here, Kane, it means, to be jealous, but it also means to be zealous. Think about Phineas. Phineas was zealous for God. And so when he saw some people doing something they were not supposed to do in a place that they were not supposed to do it, that zeal drove him. Think about if you go to a sports game, maybe baseball or football or basketball, and you are zealous for your team, right? You're so excited that your team is doing well. Let's say they win. Yay, right? We're so excited that our team won. Now, the same type of emotion could be used in a negative sense. Let's say that our team is losing and the other team has a star pitcher. He's just so amazing. And we start feeling like, you know what? It's not fair that they have that pitcher and we don't. That would be that same basic emotion, but now used because now I'm coveting what you have, right? So zeal is something that I have something and I want to protect that. I want to keep it safe and I'm proud of it. That's what zeal is. That's where a lot of patriotism comes from. We love our country. We want to protect our country. We're going to defend our country. That is zeal. Whereas jealousy, so again, zeal and jealous, they're the same word, exact same word, both in Hebrew and in Greek. Um, it's just the flip side of zeal. All right, where you're jealous that somebody else does something, or sometimes you hear about the jealous husband, and that can be, that he's distrusting, he's not believing that his wife is going to be faithful, and he's always afraid, right? So that's like a fear-driven type thing. So that's not good, obviously. But that's not what God is. God is not driven by fear, but he is protective of that which is his, and he's now in this special covenant relationship, right? He's put his good name out there to be in this covenant relationship with Israel, and he wants to, one, protect his name, but he also wants to protect his people, and he wants to protect them from the bad people out there. Now we have a little bunny, and I let the bunny out many times, but the bunny has kind of found a way to escape momentarily. We have a little construction going on, and so I have to make sure the bunny stays in. And why? Why do I have to do that? Well, I don't want her going in the front yard, because then she could venture off into the street. She could get hit by a car. There are other animals out there. They're not in the protective area of my backyard. That's not good either. So I am zealous for the little bunny because I want her to be safe. That's the same basic idea that God has for us. He's zealous for us, and he wants us to be safe and to not be destroyed. That's what Moses is getting at here. All right, so from there, if you start doing these things, which Moses kind of knew they would, and of course God did as well, when you're in distress and all these things come upon you in the latter days, when you turn to the Lord your God and obey his voice, that's important, right? You have to repent, right? You've got to turn, right? So that's the word turn, is to repent. And you do what? You repent and you stop doing the bad stuff, and you start doing the good stuff, right? You start obeying. That's what it is to repent. For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not forsake you nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. For ask now concerning the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and ask from one end of heaven to the other whether any great thing like this has happened, or anything like it has been heard. Did any people ever hear the voice of God speaking out in the midst of the fire, as you have heard, and live? Answer no. Or did God ever try to go and take for himself a nation from the midst of another nation, by trials, by signs, by wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and by great terrors, according to all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Answer no. To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord himself is God, and there is none other besides him. God is one, right? There is one God. All these other so-called gods, they are real entities, yes, and they're mighty, but they are not in any way, shape, or form equal to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, there is something that has kind of crept into Christianity, especially people who are not well studied, let's say. I don't know how to say that nicely. But there's a number of people. I'm not talking to you guys, because you guys are studied. All right. But to the other people, there's this thing called duality. And there's this mistaken belief that Satan and God are equal but opposite forces, right? You got God over here, he's trying to do good. You got Satan over here, he's trying to do evil. And sometimes God wins and sometimes Satan wins, because they're equal but opposite forces. That's not the case. Now, Satan is real. He is evil, right? He's pursuing things that are not pleasing to God. So that's what makes him evil. And he is powerful, but he is not all powerful. He's not all knowing. God is all powerful and all knowing. You might say, well, then why does God allow Satan to do anything? Because it's a legal battle. And when God gave the dominion of the planet and the whole cosmos, for that matter, to Adam and Eve then gave it to Satan, which was not a good idea. And when they did that, it became a legal battle versus a battle of who has bigger muscles. God has bigger muscles for sure. But now it's a legal battle. And that is how Satan had the rights to planet Earth, and he boasts about that to Jesus. Hey, all this has been delivered to me. Just bow down and I'll give it to you, right? So that's what he was getting at. So God had to take care of the whole legal situation, which he did through the cross, right? You guys all know that. If you want to learn more about that, I wrote an entire book on that topic. I think it was incredibly exciting. Corrupting the Image Volume 2. Amazing discoveries. I think you'll like it. If you don't, I'll give you your money back, but give it a try. I think you'll like it. All right. So nobody has ever done this, right? So he says, out of heaven, he let you hear his voice that he might instruct you. On earth, he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their descendants after them, and he brought you out of Egypt with his presence, with his mighty power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land as an inheritance as it is this day. Therefore, know this day, consider it in your heart, that the Lord himself is God in heaven above, and on the earth beneath, there is no other. Ein od, right? God is it. So don't worry about those other so-called gods. Are they powerful? Yes. But nothing compared to our God, right? Now, Satan is a master of deceit and master of disguise, and he will do clever things to trip us up, and he uses our own sinful desires to lead us into darkness and into deception, right? So we do it freely. He has some clever tricks that kind of help us to believe that, but we should know better. Just like Adam should have known better than to eat the fruit, which God said, don't eat. Okay. That's another story. All right. You shall therefore keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time. All right. So the land is theirs forever. That's one thing. Keep his statutes and his commandments that Moses commanded them, because those are how to live a successful life within God's universe. Okay. And if you keep them, it'll be great. If you don't, it's going to be painful. All right. Now, one way to think about God's laws that I find especially helpful is to think of some sine waves. Okay. So it's kind of hard for me to go like, okay, maybe I can do this. So you got some waves that are going in parallel with each other. Okay. Those are sine waves. All right. Now, when they're going, when you have two waves, one over the other, and they're going in parallel with each other, I'm doing the best I can here, then they actually increase the amplitude, and there's more energy from the two of them together. Right? There's this increase in energy because now they're working in unison, they're in harmony with one another, and there's an increase in energy. But there's another thing called an interference pattern, and this is where let's see if I can do this, where you have waves going like that. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm trying. I'm not that clever. All right. So, but when they cancel, that becomes an interference pattern, and that messes everything up. Let's see. I might have this on my computer. I might. Then again, I might not. Yeah, I guess I don't. Anyway, when you have the interference pattern, well, it really messes everything up. And what that is called is, well, interference pattern. It causes a destructive pattern that cancels each wave out. So we want to be in harmony with God, on the same wavelength as God, so that there's an increase, there's a blessing. But if God is going like this, and then we're going the opposite direction, well, guess what? We're going to cancel each other out. Now, there's going to be no net loss for God, but there will be for us. Because when you work against the Almighty, well, he always wins. He always has more power. He always has more time. He always has more energy. We're finite. And so we're going to run out of all of those resources before long. And, again, we can try to go against what he said to do, but it's not going to work out too well. I guarantee it. It just won't do it. And it's actually scientifically proven that it will not turn out so well. Okay. It'll turn out really bad. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So keep his statutes. Then Moses set apart 3 cities on this side of the Jordan toward the rising of the sun, that the manslayer might flee there. He who kills his neighbor unintentionally, without having hated him in time past, and that by fleeing to one of these cities he might live. Bezer in the wilderness of the plateau for the Reubenites, Ramoth and Gilead for the Gadites, and Golan and the Bashan for the Manassites. Now this is the law which Moses set before the children of Israel. These are the testimonies, the statutes, and the judges which Moses spoke to the children of Israel after they came out of Egypt. On this side of the Jordan, in the valley opposite Beit Peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon, whom Moses and the children of Israel defeated after they came out of Egypt. And they took possession of his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, 2 kings of the Amorites, who were on this side of the Jordan toward the rising of the sun. From Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, even to Mount Sion, that is Hermon, and all the plain on the east side of the Jordan, as far as the sea of Arabah, below the slopes of Pisgah. Okay, chapter 5. There's still so much, and I have no more time to get through this. Oh, no. All right. And God called all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judges, which I speak in your hearing today, that you may learn them and be careful to observe them. All right. So again, these are already laws of the universe, if you will. And God is saying, here's how you navigate these things. These are my instructions on what to do, so you have a good and successful life. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, those who are here today, all of us who are alive. The Lord talked with you face to face on the mountain from the midst of the fire. I stood between the Lord and you at that time to declare to you the word of the Lord, for you were afraid because of the fire, and you did not go up the mountain. He said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. Look, if God is life, if God is light, if God is the epitome of goodness, then turning away from him means you're getting what? You're getting death, you're getting darkness, and you're getting, well, what that which is not good, hence evil or wickedness. Those don't really sound so good. I don't know. Death. I've always wondered why people have such a fascination and a love for death, right? People that are kind of into death metal and to dressing like they're going to die, and they keep talking about dying. And I'm like, I don't get it. Why is that so exciting? I don't know. But it sounds like pain. And it even says that there's pleasure at God's right hand for forevermore. So God is also the fountain of pleasure. So what's the opposite of that? Well, pain. I'm not attracted to pain. It doesn't sound like much fun at all. So if you're going away from God, you're going toward darkness, destruction, that which is not good. You're going toward pain. But if you go with God, you're going to enjoy all these incredible benefits. And that's what he's telling us. So if you go after these other gods, what do they have to offer you? If God is light, they can offer you darkness. If God is goodness, they can offer you evil. If God is life, they can offer you death. If God is pleasure, they can offer you pain, right? I mean, and that's what we see in the culture, right? We see this a lot of times with people that are kind of more fringy and they kind of dress that way. They're the people that are more open and maybe honest about what they're actually seeking after. The rest of us, we're a little more sophisticated and we don't dress quite that way. But it's still, if you're going away from God, you're still going toward the same dark, dreadful destination that's full of death, decay, pain, no good, right? So don't go that way, right? So that's the first thing. I'm the Lord or God. Don't have any other gods before me. If you get that one right, then you'll get these other ones right. But sadly, we don't get that one right. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. Don't serve them. Another word for serve is worship them. Don't worship them. The word in Hebrew is lavod, which means to work. Don't work for them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, right? El Kana, or Kana, yeah, Kana here is. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but keeping mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You cannot love God and diss his commandments. I think Jesus said a thing or two about that, if I remember correctly. Let's go to John chapter 14. Now, it's interesting. I just want to show you. Notice here. Notice in the references, I thought it might give me a little cheat sheet here, but it didn't. It doesn't tell me anything about the book of John. Isn't that interesting? Now, understand that cross-references are humanly inspired and people put different things there. So, we can't make a hard and fast rule about what's going on here, but it is revelatory that they did not say anything about what Jesus said right here. If you love me, keep my commandments. Oh yeah, there's that. Right, that's right. He did say that, didn't he? 1 John 5:3, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. So if you love God, you're keeping his commandments. If you're keeping the commandments, you're loving God. You can't say you love God and you don't keep the commandments. It just doesn't make any sense. Jesus said it again. John 14:21, he who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him. Now, it blows my mind. I've heard this so many times, and it kind of irks me, I have to admit, that I hear people say, well, Jesus' law is different than God's law, the God of the Old Testament, namely, which is, again, is absolute nonsense. We worship one God, right? Didn't Moses just tell us there's one God, just one God? I think he said something like that. So if you are someone who believes in the triune nature of God, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is God incarnate, he is God with us. I believe all those things, by the way, right? He is Emmanuel. He is the one who, he's the Word who became flesh. He walked among us. He dwelt among us, right? So when I see the Son, I see the Father. He who has seen me has seen the Father. All right. So to suggest that Jesus' commandments are somehow different than the Father's commandments is just, it's lunacy. All right. I don't know how else I don't know how to say that nicely. If you can think of a better way to say that, then help me out here. But John 15:10, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So if I'm going to keep Jesus' commandments, who's also keeping the Father's commandments, then I'm going to abide in his love. If I don't keep the commandments, I'm not abiding in his love. It's really simple, right? For the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came forth from God. Okay, there's so many passages that are speaking about keeping the commandments. Here's another one, 2 John 1:6. This is love, that we walk according to his commandments. So what love equals, right? You just put an equal sign. Love equals walking according to his commandments. Oh, okay. So transgressing his commandments equals not loving God. Oh, okay. It's so incredibly simple when we break it down, but we've had generation upon generation of some really bad teaching in this area, a massive bias against God, against his Torah specifically. That I don't know. It's bad. Okay, so stick with God. That's the bottom line here. God loves us and he cares about us. All right. So the third one, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you up from there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Here's another one. Now, again, I could go a whole hour on the topic of the Sabbath. We're out of time. I'm going to keep going a little bit, but so I'm not going to beat this one to death here. But the Sabbath, it's a blessing. God created it for us as a blessing. It's not some onerous, terrible duty that, oh, I got to keep the Sabbath, or this whole idea that Jesus came and he got rid of the Sabbath. Jesus himself kept the Sabbath. Paul kept the Sabbath. Peter, James, John, they all kept the Sabbath. And it's a gift. It's a gift from God to us. Here, take a day off. Will you stop and just stop doing your stuff and just relax today? Trust me, I will take care of it. If you'll just trust me, I'm going to bless you. But we don't so often. We don't trust God that he'll provide for us. And so we keep working and working. And we wonder why we have all kinds of heart problems, and we have cancer, and we have all these different things that are in our society. And it has nothing to do with keeping the Sabbath. It has a lot to do. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason that people might get heart disease or cancer. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but it is a major factor, right? By our thoughts and the fears that we carry, and then by poor lifestyles, we bring these things upon ourselves. And God's not excited that we get sick. He wants to bless us, but he's like, but you're not keeping my commandments. How can I bless you if you keep going down this path that I said to not go down? I can't really bless you until you repent of that and come back to me. Then I can bless you. And we wonder, why isn't he blessing me? Well, because maybe you're going the wrong direction. I think that could just be. Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be long and it may be well with you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. That seems pretty clear, right? They brought you into this world. The least you can do is show them some honor. Doesn't mean they get it all right. Does any parent get it all right? I don't think so. Man, as a father, I know I don't get it all right. Ooh, I can think of a lot of times I got it wrong. But still, my children owe me the honor because I've brought them into the world and I've done my best to raise them. And I owe honor to my parents because they did their best. Did they mess up? Sure, of course. Just like I've messed up. And my kids after me were going to mess up with their children, right? But we still owe honor to our parents because they're our parents. If nothing else, that's what we deserve to do, is to give them honor. All right, now again, loving my neighbor. These are some pretty straightforward things. You shall not murder. If you love your neighbor, guess what? You're not going to murder him. Do not commit adultery. If you love your neighbor, you're not going to steal his wife, or you're not going to steal her husband. Do not steal. Kind of what we just said to the first one, the one above. But if you love your neighbor, well, don't take his stuff. Pay him for it if he's selling. If he's not selling, then don't take it. And you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. If you love your neighbor, stop talking smack about him. And lastly, if you love your neighbor, don't covet his stuff. Now coveting is that sin in the heart. Nobody can see it. There's no particular penalty for coveting, right? If you doesn't say, he who covets will get 5 lashes or something like that. It doesn't say that. You're not going to stone the coveter. There's just no penalty for coveting. But coveting will lead you to break all of these other ones that God just told us, like any other god before you, right? And worshiping other gods, and breaking the Sabbath, and not honoring your father and your mother, and murdering. Coveting is that's that little kernel in the heart that starts. And if you keep feeding it, it'll turn into something ugly. Now, sometimes I think we can all have random thoughts here and there. Now, understand, if you have a random thought that just kind of comes by, it's like when you're driving on the freeway and you see that really weird billboard, you're like, whoa, I didn't need that in my mind. Well, that's sometimes you can have a random thought that just comes in your head. You're like, where did that come from? It's not yours until you decide to own it. If it just came in there unannounced, we'll just show at the door, say, see you later. I'm not going to be thinking about you. But once you take in that thought, and then you start to meditate on it, and you keep thinking more about it, and then you start watering it and feeding it until it keeps growing and growing. Now it's yours, right? So that's when it can become coveting, okay? So that's what you want to be careful of. It's not a sin to say, wow, my neighbor has such a beautiful house, and my neighbor has a lovely wife. My neighbor has a very nice car. It's not wrong to say those things. It's when you start thinking, gee, why does my neighbor have those things and I don't? That's when it turns into a sin, or it will turn into a sin if you keep fostering that. It will not end well, I guarantee it. Then these words the Lord spoke to all the assembly, to all your assembly, and the mountain from the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness with a loud voice. And he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. So it was when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, right? Because our God is a consuming fire. That you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, and you said, surely the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that God speaks with man, yet he still lives. Now, therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any more, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the midst of the fire as we have and lived? You go near and hear all that the Lord our God may say, and tell us all that the Lord our God says to you, and we will hear and do it. Then the Lord heard the voice of your words when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I've heard the voice of the words of this people which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a heart in them, that they would fear me and always keep my commandments, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Go and say to them, return to your tents. But as for you, stand here by me, and I will speak to you all the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which you shall give them, that they may observe them in the land which I am giving them to possess. Therefore you shall be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. You shall walk in all the ways the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. Right? If you keep God's instructions about how to live with his laws, which the laws that he created at the beginning that are immutable, right? If you follow the instructions regarding those laws, if you read the instruction manual, as it were, then you'll have a much better experience on this planet. And if you don't, well, then you'll have a pretty lousy experience, which could result in an early death, right? So don't do that, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? It's very simple. All right. I'm over time, guys, but this is chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. I've got to go through this. Now, this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them, and the land which you are crossing over to possess. That you may fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, and you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, that your days may be prolonged. Therefore, hear, O Israel, and be careful to observe it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord God of your fathers has promised you, a land flowing with milk and honey. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We recite this every week, every Shabbat at the Way congregation. Why do we do this? Are we Jewish? No, we're not Jewish, but God is God, right? And we have been brought into the commonwealth of Israel. Well, that's what Paul tells us in Ephesians 2, verse 12. We've been brought in. You Gentiles are now part of the commonwealth of Israel, right? So I'm part of this thing, and I want to hear, O Israel, the Lord, my God, the Lord is one, right? The Lord, our God, the Lord is one. And what does he say after this? You shall love the Lord your God. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha uv'chol meodecha. Right? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Jesus said this, right? What is the greatest commandment? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, right? They threw that little extra in there in Greek. But that's the basic idea. All these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. They're always to be in your heart. It was always a heart issue. It was always a heart issue. Can I say that again? Knowing God's commandments was always a heart issue. Period. It was never about the do's and the don'ts and you got to keep God's laws and all this stuff that we hear so much. I hear it ad nauseum, right? It just drives me bananas of how so many people are against the commandments. A couple years ago, There was I won't get into details, but a former pastor that I knew from before, okay, he heard that I was teaching the laws, the commandments, and he we talked for a bit. Then he talked with somebody else who said, "Oh, Doug is really aired and all this stuff." And then he called me back, and he kind of did like a little drive-by shooting where he kind of vomited on me, and then he hung up the phone. And he said to me that I'm going to hell because I'm putting people back under the law. And then he hung up, and I had no chance to say anything. It was very unfortunate. But it's this kind of stuff, right? Because I'm teaching this, that somehow I'm doing something bad to people. But if you take time to understand God's commandments and how they're for our good, it's not sending people to hell or because you're now keeping the commandments. You should always keep the commandments. And if Christians would think through this, they would absolutely agree with this. But they've been so conditioned, many of them, not all, have been so conditioned that they just can't hear it because they think somehow keeping the law is a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, right? These are always supposed to be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign in your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Right now, the Jews take this quite literally, right? They take a leather and they wrap it around. This is called tefillin. And they put this frontlet, this totafot, between their eyes, and it has the scriptures written on them. Now, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting interpretation. I don't agree with that interpretation. I don't think that we're supposed to, wrap a cord around our arm. Now, I don't fault them for doing that. If that's how they want to interpret that, that's up to them, of course. But what I would say is that this is something that, as it says, they shall be in your heart. Okay. And the heart there is the key word. These commandments shall be in your heart. You shall bind them as a sign in your hand, right? So what I do with my hands, I do things, right? I write, I work with my hands. Right here, this is my prefrontal cortex, right? That's where I do my thinking. And so God's commandments should be right here in my prefrontal cortex. I should be thinking about it, right? And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now, again, this is what's called the mezuzah, right? So there is the Torah on the mezuzah. Now, I actually have that on my door. I think it's nice. Now, a religious Jew would take that much more seriously than I do. He would probably, maybe kiss it or something like that every time he goes in the door. I don't especially feel the need to do that. I do that sort of as a way to identify with the Jews, also to show that, we keep the commandments in this house. It's also very beautiful. But just having that on my house really means nothing if it's not where it should be, which is what Moses said, in my heart. That's where it was always supposed to be. So the externals, those are one thing. Those are interesting conversation. But where it really needs to be is in my heart. That is the bottom line. If I have it written, out here, I'm bound on my arm, and I put this thing on my head, and I've got the mezuzah, but I don't keep them, they're not in my heart, all that other stuff is worthless. Worthless. It means nothing. I'm telling you, it means nothing if you don't do them and have them in your heart so that you will do them when the time comes to practice these things. So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you the land and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you have eaten and are full, then beware lest you forget the Lord your God, the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him, and you shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are all around you. For the Lord your God is a jealous God. We see that word again, right? Lest the anger of the Lord your God be aroused against you and destroy you from the face of the earth. You shall not tempt the Lord your God as you tempted him in Massah. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies and statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may be well with you, and that you may go in and possess the land, the good land of which the Lord swore to your fathers, to cast out all your enemies from before you as the Lord has spoken. when your son asks in time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord our God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand, and the Lord showed us wonders before our eyes, great and severe. Uh-oh, I just killed it. Hold on. Great and severe against Egypt, Pharaoh and all his household. Then he brought us out from there that he might bring us in to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always. See that right there? To command these for our good. For how long? For how long? Always. Wait, maybe for our good until Jesus came and died to free us from these? No. For our good always. Okay. Which says, Le tov lanu kol hayamim, all the days for our good, all the days, right? So we're to observe these statutes and fear the Lord for our good all the days, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe all his commandments before the Lord our God as he commanded us. Okay, I got 11 more verses, guys. When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you go to possess, and has cast out many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. When the Lord your God delivers them over to you, you shall conquer them and utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, nor show mercy to them. Remember, we've talked about this, that they were bad, the Amorites were bad, and they need to be taken out. Nor shall you make marriages with them. You shall not give your daughter to their son, nor take their daughter for your son, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. So the anger of the Lord will be aroused against you and destroy you suddenly. But thus you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars and break down their sacred pillars and cut down their wooden images and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all the peoples on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all peoples. All right. Oh, I got it. This is amazing. All right. So you are a holy people, chosen. So who are the chosen people? Well, Israel, of course, right? But this same word here is the word elect. You're an elected people. Who did God elect? He elected Israel. He did not elect Calvinists, despite what the Calvinists teach us, okay? But God elected Israel. If you want to check out this teaching in more detail, I have a teaching called Why God Did Not Elect Calvinists, all right? So check that out. It's on my YouTube channel. It's also on my website, douglashamp.com. So you can go and you can learn more about that. All right. But it's a big deal. Okay. Because why did God do all this? Why did he do all this? Because the Lord loves you and because he would keep the oath which he swore to your fathers. The Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Therefore know that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments, and repays those who hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack with him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. Therefore you shall keep the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, which I command you today to observe them. Oh my, that was amazing. So much good stuff in there. Remember, God is not mocked. What a man sows, that he will also reap. Okay, so don't be deceived. God is not mocked. What a man sows, that he will also reap. Paul said that in the book of Galatians. All right, so that's what Moses is saying. Okay, if you love him, well, he loves you, and if you love him, it's going to be awesome. If you're against him and you hate him, he'll repay you to your face. Okay, what you sow, you reap. You sow to unrighteousness, you reap unrighteousness. You sow to righteousness, you reap righteousness. And so therefore, keep the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments, which I command you today to observe them. Wow. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm always honored that you guys show up for my teachings. I really think that's great. If you do have questions and I'm not able to get to them, you can ask those on Tuesdays, right? You can put those into the Way Congregation app, and I'll get to those on Tuesdays. Okay. So I encourage you. to do that. But again, thank you for joining me. Love you guys. Many blessings. Take care and stay in the Word.